Welcome back to the channel. I'm Amie, and today we're going to talk about something a bit different than the previous videos of the bootcamp. The fact that despite everything on social media, in design, there are no absolute rules. Across this series, we've covered technical skills and best practices so that you understand how Figma works and how to design. However, design is ultimately about solving problems and being creative about it. Today, we'll explore how to think critically about design advice, when to follow convention, when to break them, and how to develop your own informed perspective. So let's demystify some common design rules and discover the powers of context and purpose in design decisions. If you follow design content on social media, you've probably seen posts like these, talking about the do's and don'ts of UI, having some specific sizes for elements or recommendation for some color scheme, spacing, everything. These rules are often presented as truth, with the implication that deviating from them result in a bad design. But in reality, design is contextual, and what works perfectly in one situation might fall short on another. Though, let's be clear, many of these guidelines come from a valid principle and can be really helpful, especially when you're learning. They are shortcuts to good outcomes based on other perspective and trusted pattern through the years. The problem isn't with the advice itself, but how absolute they sound. So great designers understand the principles behind these guidelines and make informed decisions about when to apply them and when to deviate. You might need to ask yourself the questions of what problem am I solving? Why am I designing this for? And what is the context of you? The answer of these questions should drive your design decision more than universal rules you see on Twitter or Instagram. For example, a button of 48 pixel in height, which is recommended for an iOS app, would look tiny on a very big TV. So based on contextual and use cases, you would need to make executive decision to have bigger buttons on TV to be more accessible. Something that we use is the point value instead of the pixel value, something that will basically adapt and react to the display or device that it's displayed on. Which brings us to our next point of grids and perception. You see, and I've been teaching that a lot, the 8-point grid being really helpful. These spacing system of 8, 16, 24, 32, and so on are genuinely useful. They create rhythm, consistency, and help the team align on standards. But they are tools, not commandment. Let's look at this example of a dashboard, which is using a consistent 8-point grid spacing, which is really rigid but works for a dashboard. The consistency helps the user scan the information really efficiently and provide a structural feel to the information. On the other hand, something like Cut the Rope, which is a kid's game, might have less of a structured layout. The sizes are different, the buttons are not spaced out specifically, but it works for an entertainment and kids activity. If we had something like the 8-point grid, that might feel too strict or corporate, which would be exactly the opposite of what we need. So the key is to understand what spacing actually does in design. It creates a relationship between the element and brings some sort of a hierarchy that controls the information density and affect the emotional feel of the interface. Something like this is really friendly. Something like this is very business oriented, which is data driven. Instead of blindly following any spacing rules, even the one that I'm giving you, ask yourself, what am I trying to build? What am I trying to evoke? Does this element need a bit more breathing room? These two elements in my designs need some sort of a relationship, and do they need to be tied together? Sometimes a strict spacing system is perfect, specifically dashboard, but other times your design might need more flexibility. Make the decision based on purpose and not what you see on social media. As an example, when you are creating a spacing system, You can use references and already existing system like this one, which is the Tailwind system. But for me, I'm using and have been using a flexible 4-point base system for the longest time, meaning that everything that I'm creating is based on even numbers, but sometimes I use 1, sometimes I use 15. It depends on the context. Most of the time, it's going to be strict around the 4-point system. But if your app needs a bit more breathing room, sometimes something like a 10-point system works better. So just remember that spacing systems exist to serve your design and not the other way around. On the note of spacing, typography is also something that we see often as here is the perfect scale for your design, or you should use the golden ratio here. Typescale is one of these tools that allow you to get a feel of how a specific type of ratio for your scale works or doesn't. Maybe you need something that is using the golden ratio, showing you how some of the main titles are going to be massive compared to your paragraph text. At the end of the day, these elements are going to be guidelines and structure. Typescale being like one of the best option to structure your content and have a bit of an idea. I personally don't follow these values. The main reason being the 0.2 or 0.44 rams for a font size results in an even pixel. And we know that 0.04 of a pixel doesn't exist. You can't have a half pixel. So it will only result in a pixelated outcome and sometimes a bit fuzzy. So the truth about typography specifically that sometimes it requires a bit more adjustment that goes beyond mathematical ratios. Again, the scales are really good, but sometimes you need to have one font specifically be at 25 to match the rest of your design. Remember that font characteristics also impact your designs. Each of these fonts are the exact same font sizes. However, they are not displayed the same. As you can see, some of them are more condensed, some of them are taller than the others, but they all share the exact same font size of 80 points. As you've seen on the previous type scale element, we are showing font scales in RAM. RAMs are relative measurements that react to the user's settings and scale up or down. The usual value is 1 RAM equals 16, which will help you if you are using the 8-point grid. But just know that if someone needs accessibility accommodations, they might have some screen zoom enabled and RAMs would. Going back to the example we had here, typography also needs to scale based on the device in which it will be displayed. For example, the usual minimal font size I would use on desktop might be 12, but on mobile might be 8. The reason is the viewing distance from the eyes to the screen. As a general rule, the desktop screens are going to be on arm length and the phone screens are going to be at hand length. So when creating a timescale, you can use timescale as a reference, but try to practice and build your own over time. Use some of these as initial push so that you know your values and the key of information between each of the levels, but over the years, you will probably either stick to one or involve new and innovative timescales for the design that you want to create. The goal, as always, isn't mathematical perfections. It's a typography system that creates clarity for your specific project. Color is another area filled with rigid prescription of never use more than 3 colors in your UI or use the 60-30-10 rule. Well, again, these guidelines can be helpful starting points. As always, they dramatically oversimplify color theory and ignore context. An example of a website that doesn't really use color is Pinterest or Instagram. Most of these websites are relying on the content to bring colors for the UI, but is mostly black and white. They use things like red for their branding, but most of the colors are black and white. Alternatively, ammo is an opposite style of website, which contains every color ever. The website and the app are meant to be very vibrant and colorful and invite friendliness. So they don't often follow these rules that we see defined on social media. So when creating a purposeful color system, start with the brand color and accessibility requirements. Define clear roles for colors like the primary actions, secondary communication colors. Test your systems with actual content to ensure that everything works and adjust based on context and feedbacks from test users. Remember that different interfaces have different needs. A financial dashboard might benefit from restrained palettes, while creative tools might need a broader range of color. You will also see design patterns as things to follow. You will hear things as always put the primary action button in the bottom right, never use hamburger menus. Design patterns are incredibly valuable. They leverage user familiarity with interfaces and reduce cognitive loads. But treating them as truth and non-changeable will limit your innovation and ignores context. Remember that you can use some of the familiarity to create innovative patterns, as these examples are the calendar app from iOS and the App Store. This calendar shows today, calendar, and inbox as buttons for quick access, and the App Store use a tab bar navigation for quick access as well. These patterns are trusted, established, and widely understood. So there is no need for new learning interaction from the users. However, some apps will go over and rethink these patterns to still feel natural, but involve a bit more creativity. In Amie, you will have the ability to navigate your content into folders to help you see what you have to do today in your inbox. So instead of having buttons, you will have folders, which is really similar. In Kann, the tab bar at the bottom is the same pattern in terms of tab bar navigation, but is curved to follow the thumb and also create a memorable experience. The key is making these decisions deliberately and not just for fun and giggles or the desire to be different. So when you encounter a design pattern rule in social media, ask yourself, what problem was this pattern trying to solve? Am I trying to solve the same problem on my app website project? And what assumptions does this pattern makes about the user and context? Do these things also apply to my situation? Some of the standards patterns are perfect. Beggar menus, headers, tab bar navigation, but other times innovation is a bit necessary. So a great designers will understand the difference in between the two and will make the decision based on the context, the project, and the user base, or the willingness to go further. Innovation in design patterns has given us every interface we use today. The goal isn't to never break patterns, but to do so with purpose and when it's needed. Think of Tinder swipes, for example. This came out and now every app is using the same thing. Gesture navigation didn't exist before Snapchat, and now that's all we see. So if there are no absolute rules, how do you make good decision in design? The answer is on developing your own design intuitions. Laws of UX is one of the best websites to practice and understand the patterns and laws of UX design. By learning why some of the approaches and laws are made, you will learn why certain laws exist and work and not just what they do. When you understand underlying principle, you can apply them better in new situations. With that, you can question everything, including the thing that you assume yourself. Things that were rules once have been changed in my head in the past, and now I thought through systems a bit more thoroughly. Inspiration in studying from diverse sources like historical design, but also culture or subculture from specific places will broaden your understanding of design. I tend to look at product design, as in physical product design, architecture, but also take a look at design from other countries like China, Pakistan, that have broad and different patterns from my own. And lastly, test and reflect with your users. So theory is good. Laws of UX are really good to have a bit of a base, but the real world people have different interactions and different behaviors to your designs. Make sure you have and take the time to do some user testing to check and reveal if you have some issues here and there. Reflecting is also something really good. After implementing a design, evaluate how well it achieved the goal. So this feedback loop of testing and reflecting will help you make better design. So the best designers are those who follow the rule perfectly. They know all the rules and they know how and when to break them. Remember that all design conventions were once innovation, that the hamburger menu and infinite scroll, swipe, and gesture navigation, all of these were all breaks from the convention that was before, but they solved a problem effectively in certain context. Your job as a designer isn't to follow the rules blindly or break them every time. It is to create the most effective solution for your specific context and user. So today we've explored how to think critically about design advices you can see on social media that are usually presented as truth. Remember that guidelines are extremely useful and you will use them every time, but they aren't laws that apply to every context. Context, purpose, and user should drive your decision based on the project, the location, and the use cases. Understanding why certain approaches work matters more than memorizing the rules. So great design comes from thoughtful consideration the user and not a rigid adherence to the formula that always work. As you continue your design journey, I really encourage you to be both humble and brave. Humble enough to learn from known patterns and experience of others, and brave enough to question the assumptions and your own assumption to create new solutions when needed. The most exciting aspect of design, at least for me, is that it is constantly evolving. And by developing your critical thinking skills and understanding the principles behind the patterns, you can contribute to that evolution in a meaningful way. As always, if you found this perspective helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more design content. Patreon members get early access to the videos. All the links are going to be in the description down below, so make sure to check them out. And what design rules have you questioned in the past or broken for good reason? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, remember, in design, understanding the why always matter more than following the rules. Bye.